Hello and welcome. My name is Rajan Datar and I'm delighted to welcome you to this latest in the summer series of webinars. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to the dub poet, novelist, musician, playwright, activist, campaigner, Tai Chi expert, passionate vegan, and all-round legend that is Dr. Benjamin Zephaniah. But first, let's acknowledge the reason why we are gathered here virtually. And today I'm talking about not just the therapy team and supporters joining us, but clients too, and some first timers to these events. And the big reason for all of that is because of West London Action for Children, which offers a range of counselling and therapy services for children and families in need who are based in the London boroughs of Hammersmith and Fulham and Kensington and Chelsea. The WLAC supports families under stress to develop their confidence and skills to cope with the ordinary and extraordinary challenges of family life. The services are primarily available for families who are eligible for means-tested benefits. Now, not surprisingly, COVID-19 and the lockdown has taken its toll on families with young kids and also teenagers who have increased feelings of anxiety in often cramped, poor quality housing conditions. And that's what makes this independent charity, who've been supporting local families for 100 years, that's what makes it so vital. So thank you for joining us. It's a brilliant organisation to be involved with. Okay, so this is the fifth webinar. And how do I introduce somebody who is basically a national icon? Well, from a public point of view, perhaps the most revealing fact is that in a BBC national poll, he was voted the nation's third favourite poet of all time, a list that includes the likes of Keats and Yeats and Dylan Thomas. And he was the only living poet in the top 10. And just for those who don't know about him, what planet have you been on? But anyway, here are some other random facts. He's been on the scene since the 1970s. He has umpteen honorary doctorates from 7 different universities at least. I think a ward in Ealing Hospital is even named after him. Nelson Mandela was a fan and friend. And after Bob Marley died, his band, the Wailers, played their first gig with Benjamin after that. He's on a lifelong mission to fight the dead image of poetry in academia with his politically charged and groundbreaking spoken word performances. We found out today, by the way, that I think I will explain a bit more maybe that poetry is off certain school curricula, which you may have heard about. Maybe we'll mention that, and that's incredible. Anyway, but this is a boy who left school at 13, had a troubled background in Birmingham, had his tangles with the criminal justice system, and as we may talk about, experienced police brutality firsthand. At the age of 22, he headed to south of London, where his first book, Pen Rhythm, was published by Page One Books. Then his first children's poetry book came out, Talking Turkeys, which introduced him to a whole new audience. In 1999, he wrote his first novel for teenagers called Face. More recently, he's released an autobiography, and I think there's an upcoming novel, we'll find out, called The Windrush Generation, I think. So we're going to find out his vision for a better, stronger, and more positive society. And after I've quizzed him for a bit, you can ask him questions too. If you see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, click on that and send me the questions. You won't be identified if you don't want to be, so don't be scared to ask anything, basically. Okay, so Dr. Benjamin Zephaniah, hello.
Hello.
There you are. How much of that was true that I just said out then?
Well, I'm not a Tai Chi expert, I'm just a Tai Chi practitioner.
Ah, okay.
When you say you do martial arts, people always call you an expert.
Right, right.
I'm just a practitioner, and basically it was mainly true. I've got 18 honorary doctorates.
Yeah, I'm 18, is it? Okay, 18, right.
Yeah.
Well, I said umpteen to make sure.
All right. Yeah, and I don't know. I always feel slightly embarrassed when people introduce me, because strangely enough, I think I've got so much to do, and I think in so many ways I've failed, and you know, but that's something we may talk about. Imposter
syndrome kind of stuff as well. I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Well, I've always had kind of confidence in myself, but when I say I failed, I just think when I look and see some of the racist and sexist leaders we have in power, and I kind of think it's my fault because I didn't do a good enough job in the 70s.
Okay, well, we're going to come back to that and perhaps look at that. I mean, not your particular failings, but what's happening.
Yeah.
Life in the time of COVID, how's it been for you?
It's not really a problem, and I hesitate to say that because I always think about people who it is a problem for. A couple of days ago, I saw Usain Bolt and some members of the Marley family sitting in their mansions in Jamaica, telling everybody to social distance. Now, if you know the slums of Jamaica, I mean, it's more or less impossible to social distance, you know?
Yeah.
And I think about those people. I've had family that I've lost in Birmingham and family who got very ill, friends and family that I've lost in London. I have to acknowledge I'm quite lucky. I'm in the middle of a field, basically, a small village in Lincolnshire. We've got plenty of space here. And I realise that I'm lucky for that. I'm a writer. I would be either writing in England right now or writing in China. So I have had it okay, it's no problem for me. But my heart is with these people who have really struggled.
Yeah. But you have an allotment, don't you, as well?
I have have you been looking at Google Earth?
Yeah. Not Google Earth, but no,
yeah. I have I call it an allotment. Some people have been calling it a farm. It's not a farm. It's just a private allotment. And it's great because actually when I heard about the lockdown, I just planted it up, you know, thinking that I actually thought that the lockdown's going to kind of last until November or something. So I've got food to last me right through the year, and all my meals now come from the garden.
Wow. And you are a vegan, aren't you? You're a strict vegan.
Yes, yeah.
Because last week we had a person on who was talking about the importance of young people, particularly city kids, getting to learn about cultivating and growing vegetables themselves and why that's so important.
It is, you know, it's really easy for people to forget where food comes from. But there's something very special about growing food. I don't know what it is, and maybe I should write a poem about it to try and capture it in the future. But I remember when I grew my first food and ate it, I had it on a plate and I looked at the plate and the whole meal was from my garden. And I was sitting here and I was alone. And I had almost this like spiritual feeling, and we didn't have Zoom then, it was Skype. I got a couple of different computers up and Skyped all my friends, and they just sat there watching me going, I grew this. I remember this when it was just a little seed. But there's something very special about that. And I do think that a lot of kids in the city don't really understand what the country is. And some people can stereotype too much. They think everybody in the country is rich. If you've seen rural poverty, it's terrible. Mm. I mean, if you're a 14, 15-year-old and you're in the countryside and you've got no money, it's terrible. And you miss the last bus.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you need company, and the nearest village is 10 miles away or whatever. So when I first came here, I used to do this thing where I took kids from the city here, and I took kids from the country down to London. And it's really interesting. These city kids, a lot of them are really hard. You know, some of them have been in trouble with the police, and they know their ends and everything. But they've never seen real darkness.
Yes.
You know, and that really spooked them out. And some of them clench their fists as if they're going to fight the darkness. You can't fight the darkness. You know, you've just got to go with it. And then, and hearing animals that are not just cats and dogs.
Yeah, yeah.
In growth and stuff like that, it freaked them out. And these are tough city kids. And then the country kids, because I'm in Lincolnshire where it's very flat and you see a lot of sky. One of the first things one of the kids said to me was, "Where's the sky gone?" I said, "Look up, you'll see the sky, look up." Oh, yes. Because here you just look ahead and you see the sky.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So but you're a city kid. And what made people might be surprised you're living in Lincolnshire?
I always loved the countryside. I was one of these kids that when I went out with my dad in the car and he was driving down from Birmingham to London, I'd have my nose at the window, looking at the animals, looking at the trees, looking at the birds. I always loved the countryside. And if Dad ever stopped for a break, I would just run into a field and open up. I just loved it. I loved climbing trees and stuff like that. But later on, when I went to Jamaica, I realized something, that my family and lots of Black and to a certain extent Asian, I mean, it's changing now. A lot of us came from small villages in the Punjab or in St. Elizabeth, Jamaica and places like this. When we came to England, we were dubbed in the city people because we went to the factories and we went to drive buses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When I went to Jamaica, I was like, oh, this is why I love the country. It's in me. I feel at home here. And when my mother came to visit me here for the first time, she went, oh, it really looked like St. Elizabeth. St. Elizabeth is a place in Jamaica. So, yeah, I got to say that when I moved here, I didn't have what some people expected, which was a lot of white country people not knowing how to deal with me. And I also have to say that it wasn't like they saw me on television, so it was like a celebrity moving in the village. And I don't call myself that, but so I don't know what it would be like being black and unemployed moving here or something like that. Right. I can't say that, right?
Yeah.
But I did get a lot of, sometimes people of colour, I don't really like that term, and kind of concerned white people going, oh, how are you going to deal with the country? You know, your place is in the city. And I go, no, my place is not in the city. If we are fighting for a place in Britain, I want my place to be anywhere in Britain.
Yeah.
I don't just want to be in Brixton and Handsworth and
yeah.
Tottenham.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to go anywhere. So I found it. I found a kind of slightly negative comment from people who should be on my side.
Yeah.
Strange thing.
Very strange. Yeah, I mean, let's go back because you're kind of referring to that thing. Let's talk about the other big event of this year. I mean, in my book, probably even more important, but Black Lives Matter.
Right.
The death of George Floyd. What was your immediate reaction when that happened?
Well, I don't know how much you know about this, but that is exactly the same way that my cousin Mikey Powell was killed. It was, in his case, it was a foot in the back of his neck while he was on the floor. And in his case, he was actually in the police van and not at the side of it. So I automatically had, I mean, I didn't see what happened to my cousin, but seeing what happened to George Floyd, I mean, I saw it online. I had pictures of what happened to my cousin. And then I remember how people started to talk about it all over the world. And I thought, this is good, you know, that people are talking about it. And I actually said that I am actually not going to do much press about it. I'm just going to be quiet. And I saw this younger generation of activists coming up. But then a lot of people said, come on, Benjamin, talk about it. This is how your cousin died. Because there were a lot of other kind of people saying, oh, that's America, you know, it doesn't happen here. And so then I thought, you know, I've got to say something. So I went on Channel 4 News. I remember that week I went on Channel 4 News, and the moment I went on, I mean, that night I was on the news again, and the next morning I was doing breakfast TV. For the next 2 weeks I was on all the time talking about it, because people just saw the similarities. And people need to understand that it's not just an American thing.
And you yourself, I mean, you had a pretty horrible time when you were a teenager in a prison cell, is that right?
Yeah, and you know, I was a very troublesome and troubled kid when I was younger. I was in care for a while, and I went to Borstal, and so I wasn't an angel, you know, but also I didn't deserve to be fitted up by the police, as we call it then. You know, I didn't deserve to be kicked, beaten. You know, I had my, I hesitate to say this, but I'll say it anyway. I had my testicles kicked into my stomach by a police officer, you know. I can't tell you the things that I had, but I don't know if you've ever seen a television program called Life on Mars, I think it's called.
Yeah, yeah.
Where they show you exactly, well, almost exactly how the police used to act back in those days, how sexist they were. It was a little bit like that. I mean, the police took you in and they gave you a kicking.
Yeah.
You know, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And they got you to do deals with them, and it's, you know, I don't know. Sometimes I get really emotional because I remember being in a police cell and just thinking, I'm going to die here. And it's a strange thing, because life, your head does slow down, and I'm thinking, who's going to tell my mother? You know, I've got a twin sister, thinking, you know, oh, my twin sister is going to grow up to be a big woman, and I'm going to die a 16-year-old rebel in a police station in Birmingham, and all this kind of stuff. And I remember thinking, I didn't understand things like citizens' advice and human rights and all that kind of stuff, you know. I just thought I was going to die here, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. None of them white people care. Nobody cares. So it brought back those memories, and yeah.
And what do you think? I mean, like, a lot of Black and Asian people are looking at Black Lives Matter, looking at all the things that government and whoever else is saying, oh yeah, we're going to change it, we're going to make it better. But we've heard it before, you could argue. Does that cynicism creep into your mind?
A little bit. I think this is different though. I've been on a few Black Lives Matter marches, and they were basically all black people. Now, in some parts of the country, in some parts of the world, the black people are outnumbered by white people. I'll never forget seeing a banner that a girl was holding, and it said, "Black Lives Matter. They really do. Don't you get it, Dad?" Literally talking to her dad. These are young people. Some of them have racist parents, and they're saying, look, come on. I mean, my students, I've had students who tell me their parents are racist, and they don't want them to come to a university where there's lots of black people and all this kind of stuff. So I think that's the difference this time. And it's not just like a kind of protest movement that's going to fade away, because I think we have formed a Black Writers Guild, for example, and we are going to make sure that, we wrote an open letter to every publisher in the country, and almost everyone responded. And we've had meetings with most of them. We have black women working in publishers, and they are commissioning work, and they've never commissioned a black writer.
Wow.
You know.
So that's actually happening.
That's actually happening.
Right.
That's happening. You know, and I know other kind of disciplines and organisations who are doing it in their field of expertise, for example, it's happening. You know, so I don't think this is going to go away. How much is going to be done is another thing, you know, but something's going to be done. I think, you know, football, you know, sports generally. You know, I don't know if you know, but broadcasters have said, you know, we're going to look at our infrastructure, and we're going to, I don't want to call names, but I know one broadcaster that's taken, I can't remember how many million of pounds, and is just donating it to black organisations to help them. So something's happening, and it's different. And, you know, I don't think we're going to come out in a perfect world, but I think something's going to change. I mean,
to me, it's about having black people in positions, and Asian people, but because I think they are there, but black people particularly in positions of power, board level people. You know, people actually changing the way that we all have our everyday lives.
I've been invited into a load of boards.
Yeah.
Literally just after when Black Lives Matter really hit, and everybody started to talk about it, I started getting all these invitations to boards. And actually, I'm on enough boards already, and I'm patron of 37 organisations or something.
Yeah.
I said no to all of them. But there's a part of me that says, let me see if they come back when all the hype is down. Let me see what they do if Benjamin Zephaniah says no. You know, will they look for somebody else, or will they just say, well, we asked Benjamin Zephaniah and he said no, so we've done our black thing. Whatever.
Yeah.
I've got this, this may sound a little bit militant and a little bit harsh, but it's my truth. If you suddenly have to go, well, I'm going to do loads of things because of Black Lives Matter and because of what happened to George Floyd, that means you wasn't doing a lot of stuff before, you know? And I feel, in some instances, I feel slightly uneasy when people talk about diversity in their organisations, especially if they're big organisations. because, you know, I'm of an age when we didn't really use the term diversity. We told it as it is. We wouldn't say, you know, you need to be more diverse. It sounds nice and it sounds encouraging. But the truth of it is you need to stop being racist. You know, it's the other side of the coin.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what interests me. It's like, I hesitate to talk about power because I think power is it all depends on what the job is, what the organisation is. But who are the gatekeepers? Who are making the decisions? You know, and a long time ago, somebody said to me that this is a bit misguided, but I wrote a poem called Black Pride, and one of the lines in it used to go, "So in my darkest hour, when I move with the tide, I do not need black power because I have black pride." And what I was trying to say was, I don't want to just replace white power with black power. I'm a revolutionary. I want something different.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't just want equality with white people. If white people are oppressed, I want the white people to unite with me together so we get something better for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and when you think like that, you stop just ticking boxes and you look at the bigger picture, in my humble opinion.
But we're still at kind of, you know, that's a lovely idea, but we are still at this point here where, I mean, it's interesting you say that you're saying that, you know, young students that you might teach, their parents are racist. I mean, I'm just wondering, you know, we're going back to the...
Some of them.
Some of them.
I don't want my class to attack me.
You know what I mean? But just going back to you and I, we're kind of around the scene in the 80s when we had Rock Against Racism, we had all that stuff. I mean, that was proper, ugly, physical, racist violence wherever you went, every day of the week.
Yes.
That's different now, isn't it? Or do you think it's just hidden?
Well, where are those people gone? Where are those racist skinheads gone? I'll tell you something. There are certain, I'm going to not call names, but there are certain racist politicians and personalities now. I look at them, and then I look behind them, and I look at their security and stuff like that, and I go, "Hey, that's ex-National Front."
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I've been in the waiting room at question time, and a certain person has come in, and I've looked at all these entourage and think, I fought them in the streets of East End of London. They're not skinheads anymore. They're wearing suits, and they've set up a security company.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the same people.
Yeah.
And some of them are just doing normal jobs, working for the local council. I don't know if you ever saw the BNP when their site was hacked and they just released all the names and addresses of people. I mean, I looked at it and I was surprised how ordinary some of the jobs of these National Front people had, these BNP people rather. So, you know, they can't get away with just walking the streets in gangs. Yeah, you and I remember when you came out of clubs and they used to be a gang of skinners on the corner or something like that. They can't get away with that in the same way like they used to.
Yeah.
But they're a lot more, and I hate to use this word when it comes to racism, but it's true, they're a lot more sophisticated now. They can work in organisations, they have operations going on, they can administer their racism in completely different ways, which mean that they don't have to be fogs on the street anymore. And that's a very different fight, you know?
Yeah, and there are still ugly, horrible incidents like the NHS worker who is the rapper. Did you hear about that? Who was
yeah.
And that was
yeah, there are still instances like that. I'm not saying that doesn't happen anymore, but it's you know, every major city used to have its gangs of skinhead folks. That they can't do that anymore.
Yeah, yeah. What was interesting about that time, though, the 80s was and the late 70s, was how punk and reggae, in a positive way, were like coming together. And reggae is the music that drives you. I love it too. And you know, that I think is something that we can talk about a bit, because it's what is the power for you of reggae? Because it returns to you every time, doesn't it? It infuses everything that you do.
I think it's because it is a music that is really born out of struggle. It came from some of the poorest people in the world, you know, in a small little island. I remember when I was living in London, I was living next to this Pakistani lady, and her English wasn't brilliant, but I think, you know, I can speak a bit of Urdu. And she said to me, oh, you know, I go shopping with all these Jamaican ladies. I'm talking to Jamaican people all the time, and I hear Jamaican music. You know, can you show me where Jamaica is? So I took out a map and I showed her where Jamaica was, and she went, "That little place." She's expecting somewhere as big as India or something, you know. I mean, she went, "That little place," you know. And because these people had experienced slavery and colonialism and brutality, and they were still in these slums, but they had rhythm, they had a way of expressing themselves, and they had a way of being political and spiritual at the same time, which I think was lacking from a lot of political and spiritual movements. Some of them were just too spiritual and not dealing with anything on earth, and some of them were just dealing with earthly stuff and not dealing with anything spiritual. But Rastafarianism and reggae said, you know, we can combine both and express it through music. And, you know, not everybody that listens to Bob Marley or Burning Spear or whatever has to be a Rastafarian, but they can identify with the general message of unity and love and coming together. And why we punks? Because a lot of the time we were living on the same estates. The racists hated us both.
Yeah.
At that time, we were policed in the same ways. It's really interesting talking to kids now who can't understand why punk, which was so fast and so kind of aggressive and very white and very working class, and reggae, which was very almost going backwards and slow and spiritual, why would they have anything in common? And I said, because we were living together, you know, and we were policed in the same way and we were attacked in the same way. So I think those are a great moment. And the other thing is, the thing that people don't talk about much, and I guess when I talk to young black people about it now, I get so many different types of reaction, is that black back then was used as a political term. So, you know, all the Asians were black.
Yeah.
And all the Jamaicans and the Africans, we were all black. We weren't so divided like Jamaicans and Trinidadians and Bajans and Sikhs and Muslims. I hardly ever heard anything about Sikhs and Muslims and all that kind of stuff back then. We were all in it together. And if you were Irish and you got beaten as well, you were black too, you know. Just like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Black was, and a lot of people shy away from that now. So it's kind of, to a certain extent, you could say a bit of divide and, if not rule, conquer.
Yeah, it's fragmenting.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. I think it's all about the bass, personally. All about the bass. And you play a bit of bass, don't you?
I play a bit of bass, yeah. I played bass on my first album. All of the bass on my first album is played by me, which is just weird. It's a weird story. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah.
I had this bass player who was a great black bass player, and he played live with me all the time. I got my first record deal. You know, back then, recording was a big thing. You got your money, you went to the studio, you know, and got the money, went to the studio, told my musicians, I got some money and we're going to record an album. And my bass player came into the studio and just couldn't record under studio circumstances. He just, with the ear headphones on and stuff, playing to a track and all this, he couldn't do it. We spent 2 days with him, which is a lot of money back then. And I said to him, sorry, I'm going to have to do this myself. But I knew all the bass lines. So I just played the bass. That's why on my first album, Rasta, the bass is all me. You know, and I met Family Man Barrett, the bass player from the way.
Yeah.
And they all say, that's brilliant bass playing on the album. And I go, is it? You know. And I did have this knack, which is difficult in reggae, of being able to play bass and sing.
Yeah.
You know, which is difficult because the bass is going one way and the vocals are going another way.
Yeah.
It's much easier if you're doing the rhythm.
Yeah. Except the rhythm of the way that you deliver poetry and write poetry is going with the bass. There's a bass sound, the bass vibe to it. Do you know what I mean? It's going with the groove, isn't it?
It is bass. Linton Kwesi Johnson made an album called Bass Culture, and people have used that phrase before, and I think it's true. I don't know. I've got this theory, and I guess a musicologist could prove me wrong, but in my experience, nearly all black music, the bass is really important. and we move our bottoms to it, you know. It's a weird thing to say. We kind of automatically bend our knees, and it's such an instrument that you can jump to it, or you can just do that to it, and it's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I go to Africa and you listen to the drum and there's that bass drum, and people move to it, you know. That's a little pseudo theory of mine.
And just moving away from that, because I'm just conscious that some people watching are going to be young people, young teenagers, who I'm just being slightly serious again here, who, in this kind of COVID situation, who are feeling stressed out, anxious, and it'd be quite good to know, because you do a bit of counselling, you go, you know people like that, you talk to people like that, don't you, quite often? Yeah. How have you engaged with them recently, and what's it been like learning about what they're feeling?
Well, I mean, it's not my area of expertise, but I've young people around me, and I've never really said this in public, but you know, I have my own gym here. I have actually 2 gyms where I live. I have my own private little, it's going to sound so presumptuous, I have a little tennis court and a little football field of my own, and I invite the community in, and it's all young kids that come in, because I know what sport was like. And sometimes when I'm playing sport and I can see with them, and I can see one's not quite connecting with the game, or not all there, or is in a bit of a mood, you know, you'll talk or whatever. I'll call him later and say, you know, were you all right? And that's me trying to do my bit in my little way. But, you know, there's young people in my family. I don't have children myself, there's young people in my family. And I've always said to them, you know, in fact, I don't allow them to call me uncle. No, I just say, call me a friend.
Yeah.
Because when I find they talk to me about things that they won't talk to their parents about. And because I've got a life in public and I talk about things openly, they will come and talk to me about things. But I have to say, in my experience where I am now, most of the younger people have been relatively okay.
Right, right.
Some of the young people that had problems before, they may have been kind of exacerbated because of the situation. But most of them, in my experience, are getting on okay. I tell you what I think is going to be a major issue in the future is the mental health of people who have had COVID-19. My sister and her husband had it. My sister's recovered fully physically and she's a little bit weak. Her husband, who was on a large ward, he's been out of hospital now for 2 months. He cries like a baby all day, all night. Because he was on a ward where he saw people dying in front of him. My sister was in a little private ward. And she was in a private ward because she was more contagious, actually. But he was in one of the wards where he saw and he heard people crying at night, and people that couldn't see their family and things like this. So he is really, and he's got no help yet, you know. And I mean, they're talking now that things are opening up a bit of getting him help. And this is a guy, I mean, this for young people, anybody who's listening to this, I gotta tell you, this is a guy that could take care of himself. You know, he used to be a bouncer for like Madonna and Mariah Carey, and you know, he's done all this kind of stuff. But his physical health was all right, but you know, there's only so much that you can take mentally. And I always tell people that, you know, one of the things that we have to be able to do is to talk about our mind just the way we talk about our foot and our arm and our legs. And so,
but because there's still a taboo about mental health. I mean,
yes,
I mean, and you know, people are more open, but there is a massive taboo about talking about, and trauma from this situation, you know, hasn't even come out yet. As you say, it hasn't really, you know, developed yet.
It hasn't come out yet. And also, you know, I've come from a family, a lot of us work for the National Health Service, and the stress upon the doctors and nurses, and you know, I've got one slightly distant relative who's just a cleaner in the hospital and was scared to go in, and every now and again would have to go and clean out a room where somebody's died or something like that, and the stress upon him was just, and you know, and he hasn't let him bring it. It hasn't kind of brought him down as such, but I think it's going to show later. Sometimes the effects kind of come later. I mean, like I said, I'm not an expert in this. This is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think possibly if you're cooped up in a little flat in right in the middle of the city, and you had to be there for like weeks on end, not going out, and now even now it must be horrendous.
I did see something once on television which I thought was really interesting. It was like two families and the same size, and one had a rather big kitchen with an Arga and lots of rooms, and mummy and daddy had a room to work in and all that kind of stuff, and the kids had their playroom and everything, and it was about their family through lockdown, how they dealt with it. And then there was like an identical family on the 9th floor of a tower block in Tower Hamlets, and what it was like for them, you know, and the difference was so stark. I mean, yeah, we have I think we're going to have to deal with a lot of things after this. What I'm really passionate about, and I don't really feel that I've been given the opportunity in most places to kind of talk about it, and I'm not going to talk about it here too much, but I'm just going to mention it. When people talk about going back to normal, you have to understand normal got us here, you know. I'm sorry for going on about being a vegan, but I'm going to do that now. We vegans have been talking about this for years. We've been saying, I know that viruses jump from animals to humans every year. Every year we usually manage to get on top of it. So it's usually a local thing somewhere. And every now and again you hear about SARS, or you hear about MERS, swine flu. I mean, don't blame the Chinese, that came from Mexico. Mad cow disease came from England. We've got to change our relationship with animals. Otherwise it will just keep happening. And it's just about how bad it is, you know. And the thing is, I don't know if you know about antibiotics. Antibiotics, the bacteria kind of get stronger, and you have to make stronger antibiotics, you know what I mean? Well, that's what's happening with these coronaviruses. They're just getting stronger and weirder every year.
Yeah, they're learning how to fight human resistance.
Yes, yeah. So anybody that's listening to this, please, I mean, I don't want to bang on about veganism, and I don't want to bang on about animal rights, but just look at what we do, because we feed the industry, and the industry, when we vegans approach the industry and say, you know, what are you doing? This is wrong. They say, well, there's a market for it, and it's market forces. Yeah, yeah. We now know that we can live on all kinds of diets, and a vegan diet is just as good as any other diet. I'm not trying to push people to be vegan, but just let's think about our relationship with the animals as we think about our relationship with the planet.
We're going to come to, there's a few questions here that people want to ask you, but before we get to that point, let's just talk about, I mean, what's currently happening in terms of the Benjamin Zephaniah work stuff that's coming out, and music or poems or book novels. What's coming out?
I've just handed in. I'm just waiting to get back to what we call the line edits. My latest novel. It's called Windrush Child, and it's a novel for teenagers, and it's about somebody from the Windrush generation, about his journey from Jamaica, coming here and growing up here. And I don't want to give too much away, as we novelists never want to. Yeah. But it's about his experiences, and about the experiences that a lot of that Windrush generation would have experienced. And I'm just finishing a play about the history of reggae music, actually. Oh, yeah. And this play only tours schools. In London, there's a thing called Brent 2020. Yeah. And it was supposed to be this year of festivals and everything, but now a lot of it is online. where I've done this play which will tour schools in Brent, but I think it will also go outside Brent. And it's about the history of reggae in Brent. Because I don't know if you know, at one point Bob Marley lived in Brent, Trojan Records started in Brent, Island Records started in Brent, the Cimarrons, the first British reggae band, were in Brent, you know, and a lot of great stuff came out of Brent. And people tend to associate Brixton with reggae music, and Brent feel they've been kind of left behind. So that's another thing I'm doing. I'm desperately trying to work out how to teach my performance poetry module online. And then I've got another novel to finish, which is about cross-cultural or cross-race adoption.
Yeah, yeah.
And what else am I doing? And then there's a couple of more kind of long-term things. Oh, maybe I should take this time to announce that I'm also going to be presenting a program for Sky Arts, which is like,
Ooh, well,
we modelled it on Jules Holland later.
Yeah.
But it's with poetry.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So we had to put a stop to it because of the lockdown. But what we're doing now is a kind of lockdown version of it. So we'll be in a park and people will be separated. And I start to film that later this month.
Brilliant. Wow.
And then my major thing is, as I said, I'm in Lincolnshire. I really want to get over to Birmingham to see my mum because I really love her and I really miss her.
Yeah, I can imagine that's probably a priority right now.
Those are the things that are on my mind, yeah.
Okay, let's go to these questions. The first one, this is really relevant. What do you think that poetry may become? What do you think about poetry becoming optional, or may becoming optional in the GCSE curriculum?
Well, from what I understand, this is not a position they're going to kind of embed forever. I think it's just during the pandemic, and I think it's because they found that they can't teach everything that they used to teach, so poetry was kind of sacrificed. I understand both sides of it. I came from a street poet kind of position. I love poetry. I understand the importance of it. And I love it now in print just as much as I love the performance of it. I understand how important it is I tell you what, I mean, we were talking about mental health earlier and young people. When it comes to helping people with their mental health, poetry is really important, and rap as well. You hear young women and men rapping and doing poetry and talking about things that they would never talk to their probation officer or their, I shouldn't put them in the same sentence, or their therapist about. But they'll do it through rap and poetry. So I understand the importance of poetry for those reasons. But I'm also a teacher. And right now in my university, they've just had to drop a few modules. Fortunately, they haven't dropped poetry. But I understand that, and I mean, I don't teach in schools, but even in a university where there's more money and all that, we can't do everything the way we did it last year. So we've got to make some changes.
Yeah.
So I understand both sides of the argument. I would have liked to have said, you know, okay, we'll slim down the poetry option, you know, or something like that. So there was some poetry there. But, you know, again, that's not my area of expertise. I understand both sides, and we all need poetry in our life, you know. I can't imagine a young person kind of going through that period in their life, just about to leave school, doing English and not having any poetry. Come on.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
and I think poetry's had a renaissance during COVID. You really feel that poetry's come out more even.
Yes, yeah, this is a great time for poetry.
Yeah.
You know, and like I said, the great thing about teaching poetry in schools now, and I mean, I'm one of the people that not only do I teach in Brunel University, but I visit schools as well, is that we look at Shakespeare, we look at Shelley, we look at Keats, we look at, you know, Mary Shelley, although she was more of a novelist. We look at all these great female and male writers. and we look at their work and look at what they're representing and what they're trying to say about their time. And then we look at the students and go, what have you got to say? Write your own poetry now, you know, how do, and that's the great thing. And that's why there are so many, there's this kind of, it is like a renaissance right now with poetry. And it's a shame that the education system can't stay connected with that.
Okay, we'll move on. What do you think would have helped you most when you were a troubled teen?
I had a friend, with a neighbour, and he was really aggressive. And he would go to school and he would start fights and he would smash windows and everything. And I got him one day, and I basically started to take him to concerts with me. And he used to like a lot of rap, so I'd take him to meet all these rap artists that were his hero, just to, you know, because he didn't have a dad, and I thought, let me just play dad to him, kind of thing. And I remember once he said to me, after one day when he was chucked out of school, he said, how do they expect me to go to school and act nice when his mum used to be really violent to him, when my mother just been slapping me around the head, kicked me out of the house with no breakfast, and then expects me to go to school and just be all normal? Now, I wasn't like that, but I tell you what, I wish a teacher would have said to me at one point, what's going on at home? Because I would love to turn around to an adult and just say privately, well, last night until 3 o'clock in the morning, I watched my father beating my mother, you know. And then I heard my mother crying until 6 o'clock in the morning. Then I fell asleep for an hour or two. Then I had to go to school, you know. That's why I'm angry, sir, or miss, or whatever, you know. Or last night there was an ambulance call for my mother, you know.
Yeah.
No, there's none of that. I went to school and I was naughty boy for being late or being tired and being dyslexic. So, you know, I did a program once with Channel 4 called Last Chance Kids, where we look at these kids that were underachieving in Essex, and they were all kind of mainly white kids actually. But what we did, which was very unusual, we looked at what was going on at school, and then I followed a couple of the kids home, and then we saw how they lived and why they were like that in school, and then it made sense. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's...
Okay, yeah. And you mentioned the other one, there's another question, which is, what was your experience of dyslexia?
Well, I didn't understand it. I didn't know the word. I was just called thick. It was strange because I love words and I love storytelling, you know. I loved poetry. And then when it came to writing it down or kind of remembering words to write and reading words, I really struggled. But if I memorized a poem, I could stand in front of the whole school and just do it. And then I went to London in 1978, and Ken Livingstone used to be the head of an organisation called the Greater London Council. Used to have these adult education classes. And they were mainly girls that kind of got pregnant when they were 15 and wanted to catch up on their education and stuff like that. I was the only guy there. And I remember in that one of those classes, it was £1 a lesson. Good old Ken Livingstone. £1 a lesson. And a teacher there said, you're dyslexic. And I said, what does that mean? And as soon as she started to explain it, yes, that's me. So it was difficult. But I thought I just couldn't read and write, and now I learned that being dyslexic is different from not being able to read and write. I can now read and write, but I'm still dyslexic.
And your whole life is based around words. It's, you know, words are your currency. And obviously it's oral as well, isn't it? But that's another important part of what you do, is that it's spoken. Yeah.
And when I started to write my poetry originally, and we look at it, some of it in my books, I'm trying to capture the sound of the words. It's not just an exercise on the page.
Yeah. We've got a question here about the work that this charity does with children in West London. And it's from Jennifer. And she says, can we just hear a bit about the major issues that you think are affecting inner city children today?
Well, I mean, there are so many. I spoke to a young boy, again, in my little village here, and he's walking down the street the other day and he was so upset. And I said to him, what's the matter? And he said, I hate this person. They said this to me and they said that to me. you know, I'm not going to be their friend anymore. And I said, that's fine, don't be their friend anymore, you know. And I said, when was the last time you saw them? And he went, I've never seen them on Facebook. And I said, you're so upset by a friend on Facebook that you've never met. It's not a real friend. But this is the world that these kids have grown up in. This is where they think they've got 20,000 friends. You know that most of us have a handful of good friends during our lifetime that stick with us, that we can really relate to. You know, if you're going around saying you've got 20,000 friends, you've got problems. Some people's laughing at you behind your back.
The social media is definitely one thing.
One thing.
Yeah, go on.
Well, I was also going to say, I won't tell the whole story, but the other day I had to go into an anorexia ward to visit a girl fan of mine. Her mother told me she was going to die, and I said, look, I'll go and visit her as a surprise. And I went there, and it was one of the strangest things I've seen. It was like going into an old people's home, but everybody was 13, 14, or 15. And they were mainly girls, but there was some boys. And one thing they had in common, they all had an obsession with models and stuff like that. Again, partly social media, but you know. Sorry, you're going to ask a question.
No, I mean, it's just I mean, the other thing, obviously, that the group does is therapy. And I'm just wondering what you think of therapy and how we can perhaps make it more accessible and make it more acceptable, perhaps for both sides. I mean, certainly for people who feel it's a bit strange to have therapy. I don't know.
It's a difficult thing. One thing, I mean, we always criticise on this side of the pond. We always criticise the Americans, but one thing I do love the Americans for is that you'll be having dinner with an American, they'll go, oh, I've got to go and see my therapist, you know. And I've got a friend in America who's a therapist, and he says, I've got to go and see my therapist. You know, the therapists are therapists. It's, you know, it's one thing that they're very open about, and I think we've got to get to that point. And I think it's up to us, you know, not so much me, because I'm not really famous, but people who have a high profile to be able to just say, as well as their plastic surgery or whatever, they're going to their therapist. I think that we've just got to talk about it more.
Yeah.
And I just think that I'm not sure how to do it, but we've got to normalise it more. And I would hope that, I think this is very important. And again, I'm talking about something I don't know much about, but I would hope to see that the people who work in these areas are not just, you know, and this is not an insult to them people because I know they care, but not just white, middle class, educated people, that there are people that have had experience of it. There's nothing like talking about mental health problems to someone who just had mental health problems, you know? So a real diversity of kind of people in that area of work, I think that would help. Because I remember when I was young, and some people in our community had mental health problems, and they would say, I'm not going to see no white people talk about my black problems, you know? And also in some of our communities, as we know, it's kind of slightly taboo. You're a failure if you've got a mental health problem. And, you know, in some cases, in some communities, it's more, what's the word? It's more likely that somebody actually commits suicide than talk about their mental health.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I think it's one of those problems that, like I said, I'm not an expert on it. And even if I was, I'd be pretty convinced that there's not one answer to it. You've got to approach it from, you know, who are the therapists? How are they reaching the community? Who are the community? You know, you cannot say the black community. There are black communities, there are Asian communities. How do we reach them? The religious communities, or how do we get into them? Because, you know, I've seen a lot of people suffer. They're attached to a religious group, and they're encouraged not to go anywhere.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, yeah. A couple more while we've still got time. What
smiling, what is it?
What are your favourite reggae albums of all time?
Gosh, that's so difficult. I guess Catch a Fire, Bob Marley, I love. Because it's got such good playing on it.
Yeah.
Bob Marley's just really coming into his own in terms of, he's always been a good crafter of songs, but that one is just outstanding. There's a guy called Pablo Moses.
Yeah, yeah.
Revolutionary Dream. Oh, I love that album. And, you know, one of mine.
What?
I listen to my own music. I've got no problems admitting that.
Fair enough. And your own bass playing. Just going back to the previous one, do you have any advice on how we can use poetry in the context of therapy and how to get started writing poetry?
Well, when people come to me and they say, I'm a poet and I want to, they come and say, well, I've been writing poetry and I want to be a poet, and how do I go about it? I'll say, well, if you've written a poem, you're a poet. The rest of it is kind of, what kind of poet do you want to be? Do you want to be a performance poet? Do you want to write? If you write poems and just put them in the drawer at the side of your bed, just for you to read, or some family member to read in years to come, that's good enough. You know, it's a way of talking to yourself. It's a way of kind of organizing your thoughts and expressing them in a creative way. And
therefore it is therapeutic to a certain extent, because it's...
Oh yeah. There was a couple of years ago, I don't know if this is ongoing, but there were some doctors who were kind of prescribing poetry. And there are, you know, there are, sorry, I can't remember the publication, but I did buy it for somebody once as a present who was having mental stress, and it's called something like Poems to Ease Your Stress or something like that. It's an anthology, and it's full of poems that make you reflect on yourself and make you kind of try and see things differently. So I think if you are going to write poetry, and if you're going to write poetry because you want to express yourself, please don't worry about the business. Don't worry about Benjamin Zephaniah or Kate Tempest or anything like that. You know, just think about what you want to say. Don't worry about the form too much, you know. And because it's poetry, you don't have to worry about the form. You know, you can create a new form. That's how forms were created. Just do it. If you want to put it in the public domain, do it and then get some feedback from somebody. You know? So that's what I would say to people that want to start writing. Just start writing, you know.
Yeah, and do it.
Answer the question.
Yeah. Do it because you love it, I guess.
Do it because you love it. Yeah. You know, I always, sometimes when people ask me what I do, if I'm at a bus stop and I haven't got much time, I say I'm a painter and decorator, and I do a bit of poetry on the side. You know, and it all depends on how deep you get. If they realise who I am, then I say, well, look, you know, I realise that the poetry business may just fall apart. I'll still be writing poetry, but maybe I'll have to do some painting and decorating. Just now, the poetry's going all right, thank you.
Couple more, because I know you've got something else to do coming out soon. I think we're out of time. Are there any narratives that you see coming from young activists today that trouble you?
Well, I saw a group yesterday who I haven't really investigated much. I don't know if you know about this. They kind of marched through Brixton, and they were kind of in military garb. Have you seen them?
Yeah.
And I can't remember what they're called. And they kind of reminded me a little bit of the Black Panthers. And I could understand why the Black Panthers were the way they were in that time. But they seemed very militaristic. And this is not a war on people. This is a war on racism. This is a war on ignorance. And I'm all for Black people organising themselves, but I did notice this group was all Black, and I just thought, you know, we want to move forward as one people. If we are going to, and I've got to say, I don't know this group well. I just got this feeling from them that they were kind of extremists. I'm happy to be corrected on that.
Okay. I mean, there is an issue though, isn't there? That ultimately activism you have to disrupt. You have to, in order to create change, you have to perhaps be a bit disruptive, annoying, maybe single-minded, I'm just playing devil's advocate to a certain extent here. I mean, these are things that maybe don't make life that easy for you or people around you, but in order to cause ripples, you have to drop the stones and all that stuff.
Yes, I mean, but I think a lot of young people are doing that anyway. You know, they're pulling down statues, they're looking at their universities and saying this has got to change. I think the idea of kind of going out into the street armed is not a very good one, and taking up a kind of military posturing. Like I said, I don't know. It just made me feel slightly uncomfortable. You know, there are a lot of young people that say things, especially when it comes to white privilege. I can understand some of it, but some people just presume that all white people are kind of exploiting their privilege to the maximum. I don't think so. You know, look, the house that I grew up in was a very sexist house, you know, and I grew up quite sexist, you know, and when I listened to the men around me, they were teaching me to be sexist. And then I realized that this was wrong, I had to change. I didn't go out and go out and say to women, you know, what are you going to do about this? I looked at myself and changed myself, you know, so we have to work on all fronts. And one of the things we have to do is kind of look at ourselves and look at our country and have a vision of where we want to be with it. I don't want to be in a country that's either black or white or whatever. I love, and I say this with great pride because I think it's something we've created, I love multiculturalism. You know, I love the way that we create music because we are multicultural. I love the way that Asian and white kids love reggae, and you got white kids that love bhangra, and you got this, that, and the other, and it's all over the place. And that's why we create. That's why we're such a small place and we're so creative. So let's do that. And I think going into any community, going into their shell, is backwards to me.
Okay. Last question, which is a huge one, which is from Veronica. It says, "What advice do you have to give to modern day young people?"
Well, I always say, don't be afraid to talk, and don't be afraid to be true to yourself. It can be really difficult. It can be really, really difficult. I mean, sometimes it's difficult for adults to understand what peer pressure was like. If you could imagine what peer pressure was like when you were a little boy, think what it's like now. Think how difficult it is for a girl or a boy to break away from that and say, no, I'm going to be an individual, this is me, and there's nobody like you. I mean, that's really tough. So, you know, try and be yourself, don't follow the crowd. But I also think that, you know, adults are creating a world for young people to inherit. And, you know, if somebody's in the public arena and they say, I don't like black people, or I don't like Asian people, or I don't like gay people, or I don't like straight people, or whatever, somebody's going to come down on them. Yet comedians and all kind of people go on television and go, well, I don't like kids. I don't like young people. You know, and people think it's funny and people laugh about it. And yet we can't all be gay, we can't all be straight, we can't all be white, we can't all be black. But we were all kids. We were all young. So older people should give young people the space to breathe, the space to imagine. You know, when I said to somebody when I was 8, I wanted to be a poet, I described what I'm doing now. And they couldn't imagine it. I was only 8. And I said, oh, I want to do poetry, right? It's going to be funny, right? But I'm going to talk about the suffering in the world. And I'm going to talk about the hungry people. And then I'm going to put that poetry into music and I put it into plays. You know, and my elder just went, you know, get a job. You're going to get an apprenticeship. You're going to get a job. You know, so adults allow young people time to think, breathe, space to imagine, and just guide them. Young people, use your imagination and don't be afraid to talk and don't be afraid to learn, even when you've left school.
Fantastic. Benjamin, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I could talk to you for another 2 hours. You're probably exhausted. But,
I'm I've got my medication, I'm all right.
There's one thing, because obviously the charity is always looking for funding, and this was free to a lot of people, this webinar. I think there's a text that we can put up, a way you can text rather, to donate money. So for example, you can, as it says up there, you can text Summer Series 3 to 70085 to donate £3. You can text Summer Series 5 to 70085 to donate £5. And in other words, however much you want to text, however much you want to donate rather, you can add that to the end of Summer Series. Hope that's clear. It's on the website. Is that clear to you, Benjamin?
I was going to say, actually, I've never, okay, I'm going to tell you now, I want to donate, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how to donate using a text. Seriously, don't laugh at me, man. I mean, I'm old, I'm 62, almost 63. I don't know how to donate using a text, so what do I do?
I think you just literally text 70085 and put in it Summer Series 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever it is.
Where does the money come from? In the phone?
Yes, it does. I think it comes from your. You know what? I haven't done it either.
Money in my phone.
It must come. It must come from your bank. It comes from your phone account. Yeah.
Well, I ain't got no bank account with my phone, bro.
Okay. No. But the phone, the phone bill comes off your bank account, doesn't it?
But my bank account is not attached to my phone. I'm just pay as you go or something.
Okay. We'll solve that. That may be a problem, but we'll worry about that another time.
I'll go on the website and see.
Yeah, no, just double check it. Again, as I said, thank you very much. Please contribute. It's a brilliant group, and it does amazing things. Can
I just say something?
Yeah, please do.
Well, I'm just going to say what you said, really. I mean, I looked at the work that the charity does, and I just thought this is really brilliant. That's why I'm here. And I'm not just going to kind of sit here and do this. I want to do my little donation myself. And I just want to thank anybody that's kind of tolerated me for the last hour and a half. And just thanks for being a part of this.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I mean, you know, you're getting 50 requests plus a day to do this kind of stuff. And it's great that you did it for us. So thank you. Just going to say very quickly, next week, there's a slight gear change, but it's still a fascinating topic. We've got Professor Adrian Martineau, who'll be talking to me to discuss old wine in new bottles, rediscovering the importance of vitamin D for human health. Because drawing from his research, Adrian will explain how vitamin D has played a key role in immune function for centuries, and he'll discuss its potential role in the fight against COVID-19 with a look at ongoing research in this area. So that is worth coming back for next week. In the meantime, I'm getting a thank you so much from Katrina McGrath to all the panelists. That's basically you and me, but especially me. Thank you so much. I hope I see you again soon. Good luck with all the projects. We'll look out for the TV series and the book, Windrush Children.
Windrush Child.
Windrush Child. Look out for that. And all I can say is it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's been an absolute pleasure knowing you for this long.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.